of people after watching your clips will probably have a ton of questions, but there's a few that I think would probably people want to ask immediately. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you. So the first question is, how did you come up with this breathing technique? Like, where did it come from?
The breathing technique came from when I was using the I Ching as a study guide, and it was a version of the I Ching written by Brian Brown Walker, it was very straight to the point, very condensed, and it had a Western flavor to it. And throughout the book, it kept referring to this word embody, and in terms of embodying principles, like embody patience, embody peace, embody this, embody that. And I was like, okay, how do you bring a concept, an idea, into your physical body and have it a part of your life? And so I just began meditating on the word, like patience. And I just breathed into it. And it was kind of like each breath was a step deeper into the word until the word actually dissolved from my mind. And I could literally feel it in the cells of my body. So I was literally embodying the word patience. And I suddenly had this understanding of like, oh, that's patience. Because I could feel it. But I was feeling it from its own point of view instead of a preconceived idea.
Okay. So when did you realize that this technique worked and that you could impact people with it?
When I first realized it worked was when I worked on myself. When I realized that it could work with other people, it was after I was teaching English in China, and I had a room full of really great students. They were like 16 years old. They had no idea why they were taking English. The answers that they gave me when I asked them, why are you taking English? What are you doing here? They said, well, English is very important. And I'm like, okay, well, who said English is very important? What makes it so important? And they had no idea. They were just relating to me everything that they've been spoon-fed and convinced of. But they didn't have it as a realized truth. So I took them through a lot of different aspects. I took them through the word fear. They were afraid of the word fear. They hated the word stupid. They didn't like the word mistakes. And when I had them breathe through these concepts, these principles, afterwards they had a very detached relationship with the words. Like, fear is just a word. They were okay with making mistakes at that point. And in Chinese culture, mainland Chinese culture, mistakes are a no-no. You don't admit that you made a mistake, and you just pretend that no mistake ever occurred. But after that, they were okay with it. They were like, oh, that's how we learn. And I think it was like 2 weeks later, I was talking to the head of the English department, and I asked her, I was like, hey, how are they doing? And she's like, well, they're speaking up more in class, they're participating more. And I asked her, it's like, how are they about making mistakes? And she's like, they're fine. So that's when I realized, it's like, okay, I've got something solid here that other people can benefit from. And that was the exciting moment for me. So.
Okay. What was the telltale sign for you that these students have completely did a 180?
Oh. I'd taken them through the two aspects of happiness and sadness through meditation. And primarily because I was frustrated that they kept answering the question, how are you, with fine, thank you, how are you, which was the standard textbook answer to the question, which told me that they weren't feeling the question. They weren't feeling what was going on in their life. So I took them through a meditation on sadness. And after that, you know, there were girls in the class where tears were streaming down their face. And then I took them through happiness, and they were just beaming. They were glowing, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. And I asked them, it's like, okay, now, how do you feel? And, you know, there were girls in the class, and this, again, this is another no-no in China. It's considered rude or impolite or vain to say that you're beautiful, that you're perfect, that you're happy, and yet these are the answers that these girls are coming up with. You know, I said, how do you feel? It's like perfect, happy, great, you know, beautiful. And I mean, to this day, I still get chills because it was so moving, it was so amazing, so powerful. And then I asked them, it's like, see those kids playing outside? And they're like, yeah. Do you feel like you're the same? And they said, no. And I was like, really? Okay. What's the difference? And the, the basic answer was they're asleep. And that's when I knew. That was the 180. Because in China, it's like everyone's the same. It comes up of a communist base that, you know, no one is higher or lower than anyone else. But here, these kids had realized something very unique about themselves and in respects to their surroundings.
Wow.
And that was amazing.
That
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. And where do you get your insights or your theories from? I know in one of your exercises you talked about Zen and Buddhism. How did you come to put them together?
Kind of by accident. I saw Zen as one way of thinking and Taoism as another way of thinking and being. And in some respects, there's a lot of similarities, but the main theme that I kept getting from one and the other, because Zen is so strict. Originally, it came from India as Dharma, came into China as Chan, went to Japan, became Zen. And the Chinese Buddhists had flavored Zen with the humor of Taoism. The Japanese removed the humor and put in their stoic nature, which gave it a completely different body. And the Zen masters would walk around their students with a stick, making sure that, you know, they stayed awake, that they were here and now. And Zen is very direct. You know, it asks the question and it wants a response right now. So that's why it's like lightning to me. Because lightning is instant response. Boom, it strikes and you get a response. The first thing that comes to your mind, it's your instinct. And that's the truth of Zen. With Taoism, it's very fluid. You know, reading the poetry of Lao Tzu, it's beautiful. It's soft. And I felt that we need both of these principles in our lives. We need to be both strong and instantaneous, and we need to be fluid and receptive. So there are times when we need to be one, and there's other times we need to be the other. It's just what the situation calls for.
Okay. So also about the 7 chakras, that's very interesting for me to see how you turned it into the 7 bodies. So why the 7 chakras, and how did it become the 7 bodies for you?
The 7 chakras, in a lot of different ways, based on what I read, and granted a lot of what I was reading was the westernized take on the chakras. And a lot of the Eastern influence behind it just didn't seem to register. There were some things that made sense to me, and there were other things that I just couldn't relate to. And I felt that the Western mind, as pointed out by Alan Watts, it needs Western medication, in a sense. It needs Western principles for us to be able to grasp and incorporate into our lives. For me, the 7 chakras weren't applicable enough. They weren't real enough. And so I kind of adapted them to everyday life based on what I observed in people, in myself. And I would meditate on a lot of things. And, you know, there are things I'd come up with and I'd throw out because throughout the meditation, It hit a point where it wasn't in sync. So it's a combination of just reading, observation, meditation.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And how does a tree, I know that you use a tree for your four corners, how does a tree teach us to be strong?
Well, with the roots, imagine a tree without roots in a storm. What happens with that tree? It gets torn out of the ground, ripped out from its roots, and it gets thrown around. Now imagine being in a conversation with someone and you're not grounded. You know, whatever it is that you're trying to talk about, you're not going to have a solid base from which to communicate what you want to talk about. And they're going to tear apart any of your arguments. They're going to rip it apart. So we need those roots. When you look at a trunk and, you know, you look at a stump of a tree, you look down, you see rings. Those rings come from a center point. And that was the beginning of the tree. That was where it first was planted. That's where it took root. And that's where it began to grow and align with something higher than itself as a seed. And the rings just show the ripples of that tree's growth. We do the same thing. You know, we look at the rings of our lives. You know, we look at everything we've expanded from and everything we've expanded into. I just see a tree and I see us. And you look at the life force of a tree, it's fluid, it's flowing, and that's healthy. And when we have receptivity and we have the act of giving flowing in our lives freely, that's healthy. When we have any kind of stagnation or stoppage of that life force, of that cycle of receive and give, you know, we anytime that stops, we stop. When our lives are flowing, we're flowing. Mm-hmm. And our branches, I mean, you know, we're taught to reach for the stars. Trees do that all the time. You know, so that's, I see a tree, I see us.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. And how, if someone was watching your classes and they want to get into the work, they want to start helping themselves, where would you advise them or get them to start? Say, you know, today I've seen so many different exercises and I want to get started. How does one begin without any practice of previous meditation, or even the first thing of admitting to themselves that they need to heal? You know, how do they get into the work?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, because the thing about this work, I've given so many different facets for people to, so many different lenses to look through. You can start with the 5 elements. You can start with the 7 bodies. You can start with the 4 corners. You can start with Herc, healing, resolving, removing, closing. You can start with even the 3 minds. Which mind am I linked to? I would say the most important aspect probably is just start asking questions. Am I really happy? What is happiness? Right. Make a list of things that you want in life and start asking yourself questions about, well, how am I looking? How am I defining happiness? How am I relating to this thing that I want, or this thing that I'm pursuing, or I want to be more like? I think the question that kick-started me, really kick-started me on this path, was what kind of person do I want to be? And for me, that provided a strong foundation to work from, because then all of a sudden these words started flowing up. It's like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that, I want to be this. And then it was a matter of asking my higher self, okay, so what is this really? What is this? What is being strong? What is being patient? What is being understanding? What are all these things? Because my concepts of them prior to my meditation on them led me to believe that they were something more superficial. As I got deeper into the words, I entered into a deeper understanding. of the words. And as I got into a deeper understanding, it became an embodiment of that principle.
Okay. And you've repeated understanding as one of the most important things in life that we can do for ourselves is to understand. And so why is understanding so important? And you know, how can you explain it for us to understand? Why is understanding so important?
Well, it's where we get everything from, understanding. Imagine being told how to cook something, and then having to repeat that formula over and over again, but not understand that formula, so that when necessary changes need to be made spontaneously, without that understanding, we wouldn't be able to make those changes successfully. Right. We'd have to learn the hard way. But if we understand the principles behind, okay, you add this and then you add this. Well, why do I do that? Don't ask questions. Just do what I tell you. We're not going to have that person in our life telling us what to do. We need to have that understanding so that we can be independent. Without understanding, we're dependent upon someone else or something else to be there for us, to do things for us, or to take us through something. But when we have that understanding, you know, we get the why am I doing this? What is this for? Understanding. And that is freedom. You know, it's how we're able to differentiate one thing from another. You know, we can get truth, we receive it, but if we don't understand that truth, it's going to be confusing.
Right.
And we'll have to rely on, well, I believe that this is truth.
Right.
With understanding, it eliminates the need for belief. Understanding also eliminates the need for forgiveness, because when someone does something to you and you don't understand it, the only way that you can be released from that cycle is to forgive that person. But then they keep doing it again and again and again. And it's like, oh, I got to forgive them again. Oh, I got to forgive myself. I got to forgive them. But when you understand what's going on, you're like, okay, I get it. And the person, oh, I'm sorry, I did it again. It's like, it's okay. I get it. Because that understanding is there.
Right.
And that's the release mechanism. That's
right.
the thing that really frees us. Understanding.
Right. That's heaven and hell.
And there's a story behind that, because it's poetic. It's an old Zen story. This warrior goes to this monk, and he asks the monk, "You're a spiritual man. Tell me the difference between heaven and hell." And the monk looks at him and he says, "Why should I tell you? You're just a thug with a sword. Without that sword, you're a coward. You're a nobody." Instantly, warrior draws a sword. He's getting ready to strike the monk down. And the monk looks at him and says, "That's hell." Suddenly, the warrior realizes, he's like, ah. The monk says, "That's heaven." And that's understanding.
Right. Cool. And if anyone wants to do the exercises, do you have any worksheets for them that you can, that they can download?
Yeah, it's all on my Facebook. I have a couple class handouts that I've actually put into Facebook. Roger Larson, 1970. It's ROGERLARSON, 1970. And they can go into Accelerated Consciousness, and I've got a couple folders in there, but if they look through them, they'll find the classes. One is for dynamic meditation, the other one is Accelerated Consciousness, I think. Or no, it's a Life Master Transformation class. That has the nuts and bolts of everything that I covered here in the video.
Okay, cool. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, we can put all that information at the end. And if they want to ask more personal questions, or if they even want to work with you, they can do that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.